Hello, and welcome to the Energetic Psyche, Season 3, Episode 8. Authenticity is Regulation. How living out of alignment creates chronic stress and challenges nervous system regulation. I am Dr. Adrian Campbell, and I'm really glad that you're here. I talk a lot about regulation. I talk about the window of tolerance, about staying out of fight or flight, about keeping the prefrontal cortex online so we can make thoughtful decisions and maintain healthy relationships. I talk about breathwork, grounding, trauma-informed care, yoga, and nervous system regulation. And all of that matters a lot because when we are regulated, we can think clearly, we can pause before reacting, we can choose responses that align with our values, our relationships benefit, our bodies soften, our lives feel more intentional. But I've been thinking lately about something we don't talk about as often: authenticity and its connection to regulation. Specifically, that it's one of the reasons people struggle with nervous system regulation. It isn't a lack of techniques, it's that we're not addressing the underlying causes, including living out of alignment with who we truly are. It is important to remember that the nervous system doesn't only respond to external threats. It also responds to internal struggles. If being yourself feels unsafe, if your preferences, sensitivities, beliefs, or internal wiring feels unacceptable, the body registers that as a threat. And typically, you will unconsciously adjust and adapt your behaviors to protect yourself. Masking becomes normal. Self-silencing becomes adaptive. Perfectionism becomes protective. Over time, these protective strategies become chronic stress. Because when authenticity feels costly, the nervous system stays vigilant, and that shit is exhausting. And folks, the research backs it up, showing that perfectionism is a major risk factor for poor health. There's actually multiple studies that have been done linking perfectionism, masking, and self-censoring to autoimmune disease and chronic illness. Perfectionism increases stress, stress amplifies any existing physical symptoms, and then those symptoms further increase our stress, which creates a feedback loop that can impact overall health. And masking, which is basically hiding your emotions, minimizing yourself, performing to keep others comfortable, this is associated with chronic fatigue, cardiovascular strain, and immune system dysfunction. Over time, the mental and emotional exhaustion from both perfectionism and masking creates a sustained, high cortisol, inflammatory environment. Chronic stress is a known trigger for autoimmune flares and inflammatory disease processes. Research on individuals with Crohn's disease and colitis shows that perfectionism correlates directly with higher sickness impact. The body's response to these behaviors, perfectionism and masking, is a quiet but dramatic rebellion staged by the unconscious, alerting us to the fact that we are living inauthentically. So if this is so damaging, why do we do it? Well, often it's belonging. We are social creatures by nature. We are biologically and evolutionarily wired to seek safety and connection, to belong, to be accepted, to remain part of a group. But not all communities feel safe for who we truly are. Sometimes we hide parts of ourselves to fit in at work, so we can make money, pay our bills, provide for the people who matter to us most, including ourselves. And sometimes we do it to maintain relationships. Some of those relationships are genuinely important, but others are simply labeled important even when they may quietly be damaging. This can sound like a simple switch to flip. Just be yourself, right? But it isn't. There are many reasons we choose to conceal parts of who we are. And before deciding to fully let your freak flag fly, it is essential to understand the why behind your masking. That discernment matters. Because sometimes we hide parts of ourselves because it truly isn't safe to reveal them in our current environment. Sometimes it isn't safe emotionally, maybe financially, relationally, or sometimes it isn't safe physically. So I really want to impress upon you that authenticity is not recklessness. Sometimes the work is not immediate expression. Sometimes the work is taking time to first find or build a safer community. Sometimes it's shifting your mindset. Oftentimes, it's about creating stability before you expand. The goal is not impulsive exposure. It's sustainable congruence. So what this means is that we don't immediately and completely abandon social norms or reject structure. Most of us live in community. There are responsibilities. There are social agreements. If you all of a sudden start wearing a cape and flip-flops to work, there may be some unwanted repercussions. Authenticity is not chaos. It is congruence. It is reducing the daily friction between who you are and how you're living. I often use tools like the Myers-Briggs framework, not to box people in, but to illuminate natural preferences and help provide some insight. Our culture rewards certain traits. For example, extroversion is often celebrated, high output is admired, and certain cognitive styles are praised more than others. This often leads us to believe that success comes to these types of people more than others. And if I'm being honest, it often does. So those of us who do not naturally lean this way often push ourselves into the behaviors which causes a large amount of chronic stress. For years, I worked in highly structured, precision-driven environments. The military, semiconductor industry, nuclear energy. But my natural cognitive preference actually leans towards intuitive and big picture thinking. Definitely not detail-oriented over here. But even in those environments, I did contribute well and I performed successfully. But it was still stressful. Just about every single day, I was experiencing a quiet and mostly unconscious stress as I pushed myself into behaviors and ways of thinking that were uncomfortable for me. It wasn't that I was incapable of the work. I actually did a great job. But it was because I was consistently operating outside my natural wiring without support. The nervous system notices the unspoken threat that we're facing. In my case, it was, if I don't do it the way they expect, I will lose my job. So even when we are praised, even when we are high functioning, even when we are successful, the body is still under threat and takes on all of the stress we try to ignore and push aside. Now, I am not here to tell you to go quit your job. That is unrealistic at best for most of us. What I want to bring you are thoughts around small changes that you could make in your everyday life that might help support the truest version of you and possibly reduce the load you are unconsciously carrying. Because authenticity isn't only about major life changes. It can look like choosing lighting that doesn't agitate your nervous system. For example, I effing hate overhead lights, but for years I just dealt with it. Well, not anymore. Let me tell you, my house is full of lamps with warm colored light bulbs. Or maybe it's about surrounding yourself with colors that bring calm or joy. For example, I love teals and turquoise because it reminds me of the ocean, and I am secretly, okay, maybe not so secretly, part mermaid. It could also be about structuring your schedule to be more in alignment with your energy. Now, this can be tough with a regular 9-to-5 job, but there are small ways to make shifts. Like maybe you only check your email twice a day, and you do it in a period of time where it's best for your brain. Personally, you can choose certain days for certain activities to create a higher level of certainty in your life and maybe honor something important to you. For me, it's Sunday. My Sunday is a homebound prep day. I clean, I cook, I do laundry, I take care of my home on Sunday, and I do my best to protect that day in my schedule. This helps support me and protect my energy throughout the week. If you are more introverted by nature, be sure to create time for quiet and reflection in your day. Carve it out if you have to. Again, it doesn't have to be hours and hours of isolation, unless it does, you know you best. But typically, we're talking about taking time to write in a journal, maybe listen to some music, maybe even just while you sit in your car before work or on your lunch break, or listening to gentle music in your headphones if you work in a cubicle environment, just to give you some separation between your internal thoughts and all the external voices. And if you're more extroverted, not all people are created equal, so be careful of the crowds you source your energy from. Who really fills your cup, fuels you up, makes you feel good, makes you feel like the best version of you? These are the people you want to intentionally be sure to spend more time with. These seemingly small things actually do reduce internal threat. It lets that truest part of you feel seen, heard, and be honored, even if it's just for a bit here and there. It really does matter, because when internal threat decreases, nervous system regulation becomes easier, and all those yoga classes and meditations you do will start to make an even bigger impact. If we only approach regulation from the body, breathwork, grounding exercises, yoga, we are working from only one end of the system. These tools are powerful and they matter a lot. But if we skip the identity work, the internal work, if we never ask who we are, how we want to show up, what parts of us feel exiled or left behind, then we are constantly regulating against a life that doesn't quite fit. And no matter how much yoga you do, you will continue to feel exhausted when you step outside that studio. Authenticity supports regulation, and regulation supports authentic expression. It's a feedback loop between identity and biology. The safer it feels to be yourself, the safer it is for your nervous system to settle. The more settled your nervous system is, the more consistently you can show up as your favorite version of you. We don't regulate so we can be calm. We regulate so we can live fully and unapologetically as who we truly are. And that kind of regulation isn't performance. It's whole person integration. Psyche, soma, and soul. Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you the absolute best. If this podcast resonates with you, please be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of future episodes and share it with anyone that you think it might benefit. I look forward to connecting with you in the future.